Hello and welcome back to another episode of Live here on Keystroke Medium. I am Josh Hayes here with Scott Moon and our special guest co-host Jaime Bruno or Rhett Castle or
some combination of those
like
names.
Steve C. Beaulieu.
Beaulieu.
It's spelled exactly how it sounds. Welcome to the show, and Rhett, thanks for coming on and co-hosting with us today.
My pleasure. It's Jaime, actually, but that's okay.
I'm gonna call you by I'm gonna switch it up. Like every name I'm gonna call you is different. So we'll just if you're listening on the audio feed, Rhett / Jamie's name is made up. We've just completely made up his identity today.
Yeah, I'm nobody and everybody.
Yeah,
incognito.
Let's see. Welcome everybody in the live chat. Rick Partlow had the first comment of the day, so he gets the golf clap of appreciation. Thank you, Rick.
I didn't think he was going to make it because I thought he was uploading pictures of eagles in front of his house.
Yes, true. Welcome.
I missed that one.
From the windy and cold Wyoming. Chucker Charlie D is in Greensburg, Kansas.
Oh God,
which is that way.
Mm-hmm. People know exactly which direction you're facing at your desk right now. So that makes
of course they do. I'm obviously pointing west. Jeez.
Of course, I saw that. I could see your westward
finger. Or is it
finger.
reversed? Because when I'm pointing, like that, it's showing whatever. It's fine.
On my camera, you are pointing west because I'm facing south. But
See,
it's really,
so
we're entering time-space continuum distortion territory here. We should probably stop with that.
Let's see. Patricia Gillum's in the chat. Lauren is here. Hello, Luke. Welcome. Jake Clifton Slater. Afternoon. Hello, welcome. Corey Gillum is here. Kayleen. All the usuals. James McCormick. Somebody give this man
suck up
a medal. Give him a medal. I don't even care what the medal's for. Just give him a medal. Okay.
We'll send him all the profits from today's show.
Oh, good call. Good call. Patricia said a weird transporter accident at Athon today. They have changed. Bruno, yes. Man, today we're going to talk about POV and how we can use that to build depth in our scenes and our chapters. But before that, we're going to talk about what we've been up to this last week in writing. Rhett, I know you've been on the show before. I'm assuming that you've watched the show before, but we like to give a little talk about what we've been up to in our writing careers for the last week. Scott, I'm going to put him on the hot seat.
Scott Castle.
Scott Castle can go on the hot seat and tell everybody what you've been up to this week.
Well, the biggest breakthrough, I've tried to learn something every week. I came back from 20 books all jazzed up and wanting to learn stuff. Today I learned how to change my name mid-show.
Indeed.
In the StreamYard. So that was pretty big. I'm pretty excited about that. We finished Reaper 12. It's actually done with editors, done with beta readers. It's coming out this Sunday on the 5th. So I'm excited about that. Started working on a couple of other projects. As always, I got 2 or 3 going. Very excited about those, and haven't been to work for 10 days due to a little bit of a oversight on my part that I had some holidays that had to be used by the end of the pay period. So I took them all at once and took 10
Which
days
I just
off.
want to say that that's probably the best oversight you can have. Like,
I know. I was so happy.
You have days to take off and instead of having days to make up.
Yeah, I looked at that and was like, holy shit, I basically have to take 4 days off, which puts 2 3-day weekends attached, one at the beginning, one at the end. Just 10 days.
Right.
And I calculated how fast I earn vacation time, and I've decided basically until I retire, every 3 months, I'm going to take a week off or take 10 days off. So
nice.
Pretty excited for when that next one's coming. Good times. That's about it. Most of that, getting ready for a house.
Stephen K.
Change and whatnot.
That's a good inside story.
Yeah. There you go. That's so good stuff. What about you guys?
Steve RC Castle, why don't you tell us what you've been going on?
Mostly some editing work last week. Not much of anything because it was Thanksgiving week, but
true. Struggling with your identity.
I need to catch up on stuff before writing anything else new. And Athon keeps me too busy.
Right. Well, what's your name? So your last book you published was Vicarious, right? Solo project.
Solo project. Yeah, that was the last one. That was like last April.
Yeah.
I don't have anything solo for a while. Just me and Steve's Western series that we're working on.
Which I'm 40%, 42% into Cold as Hell.
Okay, yeah, which I consider those solo anyway because it takes us like 2 times longer to write books together than alone.
Oh,
Yeah.
because of the back and forth it takes?
yeah, we go all out and it is not any faster. So
Yeah.
I consider that basically going alone.
Yeah, and that can be like a like I said, a passion project. You know, true artistic collaboration is not designed to create rapid release type things. I mean, most
Yeah.
people think, oh, it's collaboration, we're doing rapid release. Not always the case.
Well, when
Yeah,
you're doing
exactly.
collabs with other people, like you're doing one with James Wolniak, Operation Brushfire.
Yeah, I mean, I had done that a while ago, like
Yeah.
a really long time ago. And I have another one that's done that I'm sort of shopping around.
Yeah.
But not as much. Not like Jaime Castle.
Right.
Like I'll write with anybody.
He's so promiscuous. He's a promiscuous collaborator.
Yeah, I'm gonna change this. This is confused. Okay, there. Now I'm not confused by myself anymore.
A lot of people were making the confusion. They're like, "That's what he looks like."
Yeah,
He looked pretty good for being 117 years old.
And I didn't get hit by a van. I can tell you that right now. Let's see. What have I been up to this week? I Thanksgiving week ate too much. So I ate too much, but I didn't have enough green bean casserole. There was a whole pan of green bean casserole, and I told the lady that made it, you need to set that aside because that is my favorite dish of everything that could be eaten in the Thanksgiving meal. That is my favorite. That and like ham with like brown sugar and pineapple. Anyway, so I made the mistake of letting everybody go first, and then I got like this much green bean casserole. I was very sad. It was very sad Thanksgiving that I ate way too much of all the other food. Let's see. I finished 2 chapters in Tranquility 3 last week, and finished 1 chapter in Weaponized last week, and then this week I'm focused on pushing through 3 more chapters in Tranquility, and then also finishing a outline / synopsis for fantasy project.
Fantasy.
And that's it. That's all I've been working on. I'm getting back into the swing of things after getting back from Vegas, and then not enough green bean casserole. True. And then obviously we're back doing the show every week on like everywhere it's supposed to be, and
like
not
it's
just
our jobs.
right. Like our lives depend on it. Your audience riots for more Tranquility. Well, thank you, Leo. I appreciate that. Leo said he made a ton of green bean casserole with ham. Ooh,
Because he's a proud American, and that's
Why not bacon?
Ooh, bacon would be
bacon
good on
too.
that.
Bacon ham.
I don't know that I had any bacon on Thanksgiving.
Have both. We had a lot of bacon in our green bean casserole.
Did you do the onions, like the?
I think we had some of that too. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all a blur.
What they're called.
It's all a blur when I started eating.
I watched the entire season of Cowboy Bebop this weekend. And so I have a slightly controversial take on it because I think a lot of people that have seen it are like, I don't want to watch it because it's not lining up.
We should
with
probably
the anime.
start out with the translation, because you know what bebop refers to, correct?
No.
Well, bebop is jazz from the 1940s with what's his name, Charlie Parker and all those guys, and that's why the soundtracks are so jazzy. And so if you take cowboy to be bounty hunter, so what you get for a literal translation is bounty hunter jazz.
I like that.
You see
That
it all
makes a lot
different
more
now, don't
sense
you?
than Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah.
Well, I always thought the
Jazz
Bebop was his
jazz
name.
bounty hunter.
I always thought Bebop was his name, but apparently it's the name of the ship.
Yep.
I didn't know that. But I loved it. I absolutely loved it. There was a whole bunch of people, even before I watched it, there was a whole bunch of rage about it because everybody was like, it's not the same as the anime, or they took the anime and they bastardized it, and it's not like the show at all. So I went into it, and I have not watched the anime at all. And actually, I did it reverse. I watched the first episode of the anime after I finished the live action series, and I thought it captured the essence of the animated series really well. A lot of people saw the first trailer and like it's super campy and it's kind of ridiculous, and I mean it is like that, granted, but not on a level where I didn't like it.
I think they pulled that stuff off. And so I was thinking about that on the way back after we had our earlier phone conversation, that it reminds me like, so I went into Cowboy Bebop like you did, not really knowing that much about it, just kind of knowing the idea and kind of having seen some references to it and maybe seen part of an episode.
Yeah.
And so I came into it as a complete, naive viewer, and I loved it like so much. I think it's beautiful. All the cinematography is great. Soundtracks, everything worked good. The acting worked in. The campiness was just in the right places.
Yeah.
I mean, it was so cool. There's a scene where he falls off and his friend grabs him by the foot when he falls off the building, and he's hanging upside down. So he lights a cigarette. He's like, "What the hell are you doing?" He's like, "I'm waiting for you to pull me up," and it was perfect.
Yes.
But it makes me think about like people who never saw the original Star Wars, and they come into the Star Wars franchise now completely ignorant of or naive to all the other stuff and not hating it as much as we do, because like to us, it feels like this grand betrayal. And so I imagine hardcore Cowboy Bebop fans probably feel like, it was a travesty.
Right.
Don't be a fan of anything. Just watch stuff.
I literally, with all the drama around stuff lately, I literally go into every movie like, I'm just going to enjoy this.
Right.
I'm going to think about it like a writer. Of course, I always do eventually, but the first time through, I like to just watch it without getting all pissed off about how they fucked everything up.
Well, it's interesting because I looked at obviously as a writer, I look at the way that they do the dialogue between the characters and the way they tell the story, and the dialogue between Spike and the captain, I can't remember his name.
Jet Black.
Yeah, Jet Black. Spot on. Like really good. Like
they nail the whole buddy cop feel.
The buddy cop feel.
Or buddy bounty hunter.
The whole like I'm annoyed at you, but whatever. Like it was great. And then like James McCormick here, the bath thing, hilarious. Like they said it, I was like, what is she talking about? Bath shower bath.
I'm not sure I got to that one yet, but we'll see.
So anyway, she's talking about they run out of hot water, and the girl goes, well, I just finished my bath shower bath, and they're like, what are you talking about, bath shower bath? And she's like, well, I love taking baths, but if you take a bath and you clean yourself off and then you're just laying in the dirty water, that's nasty. So you take a shower, you get clean, and then you fill the bath and you get in the bath and you're clean, but you're in the bath, so you're not in dirty water. And then after you lounge in that water for a while, then you get up and you rinse all the soap off and you're done. And a bath shower bath makes sense. And I was like, holy shit, that's hilarious. I would never have thought about that. But I loved it. And some of the storytelling techniques were kind of you could debate whether or not they were necessary or not. But once you get to kind of know the backstory of Spike and even the backstory of Jet, which I thought was really good, I thought just really well presented and a fun story. So again, I can't compare it to the anime because I have only watched the first episode. But
yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, it was an extremely satisfying movie watching experience for me. So I love it a lot.
Well, let's talk about POV. I had this thought early this morning as I was doing some editing and writing in one of my chapters in Tranquility. And I started thinking about what POV actually is. And like the
personally owned vehicle.
Right. The critical thinking of POV is like, is it first person or is it third person? Even is it second person? Don't do second person. But there's a whole lot more to POV, I think, when it comes to writing and crafting a scene and then story, has a lot more to do with the depth of the scene, rather than if you're in first or second or first or third person. And what I mean by that is if you're using POV only to show what's going on, then you're really kind of doing that scene a disservice, because there's so much more you can do, especially in like third person and almost in first person too, because in first person you can do a lot more telling in first, as long as you're doing it the right way, right? Like, so I just wanted to have a conversation about that, because like if you're sitting there at a meeting, or you're watching multiple characters talk, and the POV character is just sitting there watching, and they're not having any interaction in the conversation, or you're not having, like, if somebody's speaking and they're obviously lying, or they're saying something that the POV character knows is not true, then you can use that as depth, and you can use that to layer in, and doesn't have to be on the nose, but then you can show the reader that your POV character knows that this person is lying, or knows something different about what they're talking about. And instead of just basically the POV being the lens through which the reader reads. So yeah, let's talk about that for a little bit.
So, and I never really thought of it exactly like how we talked about on the phone, is that it's a missed opportunity. And you're talking more from third person
Right.
narratives, where you're like a thriller thing, where you see something from the main character's point of view, you see something from the villain's point of view, maybe some other important people.
Right.
And that whoever is the point of view character should have some skin in the game, should have some positive, some action, some influence on the story. And when they're literally there just to see, I think you're throwing away lots of opportunities. And that's kind of like what I got out of our earlier conversation, because you can learn about their inner struggle, or their own character arc, or something.
Well, because what's the thing? Don't tell, right? But if the POV character isn't doing anything, isn't showing anything, then it is just telling, regardless of what's happening in the scene, right?
Yeah. Well, it's on the nose, because if the point of view character could be there or not be there, literally anybody who was present could have conveyed the information by seeing this exchange, then you're obviously there just to see that information. You don't care about that character. That character means nothing.
Right.
They have no stakes. It's not upping the stakes. You're just reporting on the facts.
What are your thoughts on it, Rhett? What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, point of view is something we look at pretty intensely. Me and Steve as writers prefer really character-focused stuff, whether it's first or third person. And I think it's more modern. Honestly, when I read older stuff, everything seems to be a little bit more plot-based, at least in science fiction, where you're kind of learning about the plot through characters, not about the characters themselves. Right. And that's something we really look at, even minor characters, villains, like you're revealing information to the reader, but if you're using POV, even in third person, you're revealing it through a specific lens. It lets you trick the reader. It lets you give different points of view without tons of exposition.
Right.
And again, like sympathetic villains, all that stuff, you're not going to have that unless you are inside their head, knowing exactly why they're doing the things that they're doing. I can't even, I can't read omniscient. I don't really get how people write that way. So even in third person, I write strict third person POV. So anything they can't know, they don't know.
Right.
About the world, everything. I tend to prefer writing in first person, where I keep that really strict. Like anything that is being explained is through their perspective, which means even describing a building or a faction, it's going to be their point of view of the faction. So there is always that sort of narrator distrust going on, because
what if they're wrong?
Right. Yeah, exactly. You're getting what they think personally about it. Like in Titanborn, you're getting his views on religion or something like that. It's not how the world sees it or how they see it. It's how a grumpy old guy sees it. So I really do think it's for me, the most important thing is writing is having a character worth listening to. That means they have a point of view on the world.
First person is really challenging for, like you said, because a lot of the plot stuff, you have to give them a reason. Like Harry Potter's written in first person, and I never wrote successfully in first person until just a few years ago. And now it seems like that's all I want to do, and that's all people want me to do now. So, but I remember thinking the first time I completed an entire book in first person, it was such an ordeal because there's so many things I wanted the readers to know about the plot that they just not going to know because there was no reasonable way for the main character to understand that or have any insight into that particular event.
Right.
Yeah. I think that's
makes it harder.
An important thing with first person is it's sort of easier to write, but if you create a story that's too complex and you realize you can't show everything, like for my Titanborn series, I wound up having two first person things and had to use like prologues and epilogues to show other little pieces here and there because it just grew beyond being able to show everything with just one character. But yeah, it's limiting, which I think is what makes it easier to write. But if you grow that story and world too big, then it becomes tough. You don't have the benefit of shifting over to a villain and getting to explain that. Even so, the Cold as Hell, which me and Steve just wrote, it's a weird Western. There's a bunch of outlaws that are villains. And because it's first person, you don't really see them until the very end of the book because he's chasing them. Right. You don't really... Like you're not going to get any exposition or any knowledge of what they're after until the end. So it becomes harder to carry along those rivalries. That's why for first person, I tend to write things that are more about like inner issues and inner turmoil than villains, because unless you're like, it's going to be hard to create a Batman versus the Joker dynamic when you don't really ever see the other guy.
Right.
Yeah, you got every clue or information transfer has to be carefully managed, and it's also good with first person to have somebody to talk to, and that's like in my Reaper series. He has this limited artificial intelligence, so he literally almost always has someone to talk to, so that you can just not be explaining things in the character's head, but he has somebody to have some banter with. I think it's one of the reasons that works so well. But sometimes you need them to be alone, so you have to figure out a way to shut off their sidekick, as it were, which, can be done, obviously.
There's a couple comments in the chat where they're talking about POV bloat with third person, but also Kit's making the comment about the possibility to switch between multiple first person perspectives in a book, which I like Luna Missile Crisis, you guys did that really well with the two brothers.
That was third.
Back and forth. Well, was it third?
Yeah, we wrote that so close.
Okay, you're right.
Yeah, but it was third.
It was close. Third person. It was because it could have been first. I think
we started those books first and then transferred it over so we could add in some other scenes. When we realized how we wanted to go with that. But yeah, we started first.
Okay.
And again, we write third, but it tends to be a really, really closer than most people.
Limited third.
Yeah, it could easily be first with basically just changing he to I.
Yeah. I think the only I can't think of any other first person book where I read multiple first person POVs. But like one of the Gray Man books, you had a mix of third person and first person. And it was jarring, to say the least, going from third person, because all of his books were in third person, and then that singular book, all of his scenes was first person, and then the rest of the book was third. But do you find like picking between third and first, like talking about adding stuff to the scene, like in first person, you can do kind of a biased take on a building, like that building was ugly as hell, and you can put that in a narrative because it's a first person thing. And then third, depending on how you're writing the third, that stuff is a little bit more harder to do. And so when you're writing third person, what specific things do you look at when you're adding depth to, even if you say your character isn't technically doing anything in this particular scene? Do you have anything that you try to do in that scene to give it more depth?
So I actually, before I answer that, I did a first third. That's how I wrote Vicarious. And
oh, nice.
The only reason I did it was because the girls' chapters are from him watching her. First third. So I did it specifically like with a structural reason.
The only reason I did it was because
without a reason, I don't know. I do agree. I think it could be weird.
Yeah. I muted Steve because he was
Oh.
echoing. You were having echoes, Steve. That's why I muted you.
Steve jumped in, and now I forgot your question because he got in my head.
How do you add depth to?
How do you add depth to your scenes if you're looking at doing a scene where your character isn't technically doing anything and it's watching something happen? How are you looking at doing depth?
I think Steve wants to answer that, so you can unmute him and let him go.
Oh no, I'm sorry. I was just saying I fixed it all.
Oh, okay, cool.
My bad.
Yeah, I mean, I would say rarely ever have a scene where your main character or the point of view you pick isn't doing anything. If that's the case, you probably picked the wrong point of view for that scene.
Yeah.
Especially if it's third. But if that's gonna happen, like a character listening to a conversation, then just don't have them listen. Have them have their own specific personal thoughts and feedback on what they're listening to, right? If you're in that close of point of view, then the character's part of the story, and getting their opinion on this stuff is gonna be relevant, especially if they're talking about something relevant to the story.
Right.
The character is gonna have feelings about it.
And they should want something in every scene that they can't quite get, or something, what drives it. They should be doing something, or definitely want something, have some sort of goal. Otherwise, they're just going to the store.
For those listening on the audio feed, Steve Beaulieu has now joined us. And you missed it, Steve. We were giving everybody different names at the beginning of the show.
Everybody was
really
Jaime.
complicated. So go back.
I'm already complicated. I don't need any more complications.
Yeah.
Right? To touch on that, Marvel does this a lot, which, to be honest, I hate. It's one of the reasons I don't really love reading Marvel books. Is they tend to use all these third-person points of view throughout the whole book, like innocent bystander watching Spider-Man do things, and like just this stuff that I go, just friggin' show this from Spider-Man's point of view. Like, this is absurd. We're reading Spider-Man. We want to read Spider-Man, not James Halloway, getting his newspaper from the corner store when Spider-Man and Rhino are fighting. It's like, what is this? Why are we doing this right now?
Right.
I wonder how that started, because that's very common.
Mm-hmm.
They do that in like every movie.
Well, and I think, like, speaking specifically to that, there's a couple of scenes, not a lot, but several scenes in the Gray Man series where you will have a point of view from a tertiary character that is showing basically the Gray Man sneaking into some place or doing something unexpected. And so when you see those things, like, that's going to happen. But it's not like what you're talking about, where you're showing the fight for the sake of showing the fight, and you're not getting anything else out of it.
Yeah. If you're using it for something, right? Like, don't do a weird point of view thing unless you're using it for a reason. Like, I had to use it in that book for a reason. If you're going to jump back and forth, like, just write everyone in third. What are you accomplishing by doing all sorts of different point of views and potentially confusing a reader?
Well, so it's Jonathan Mayberry, right? Jonathan Mayberry is obviously very prolific, a very good writer. He does well with everything that he does. In his series, Joe Ledger, he's got a third person point of view that's always from the villain's sake. And when I listen to those books, I often think to myself, I don't know that I needed this. I don't know that, like, don't get me wrong, Jonathan, do whatever he wants to do, right? Like, he's obviously selling well, but like, I don't feel like I needed those villain chapters to make sense of the first person chapters that are actually phenomenally well done. And like, Ray Porter narrates it, so you really do feel like you're Joe Ledger.
Yeah.
All of a sudden I'm in a villain's POV and I go, I guess that helped me understand something, but I personally like to.
Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Right before I started writing my Brace Cordova books, I actually reached out to Jonathan and asked him why he wrote the Ledger books that way. And he told me it was because Joe is such a complex character that writing him from the first person is going to give the reader a much deeper connection and appreciation to what goes into his obviously fractured mind, whereas the bad guy things aren't quite as important. See what I'm saying? He didn't want the reader to relate to the bad guys as much as they did Joe, and he thinks that that's part of the reason the books are so popular is because writing Joe in the first person makes him such a powerful character.
Well, I don't have any issue with the first person. Joe Ledger in first person is phenomenal. I don't need the villain point of view at all, ever. In those books is what I mean.
You're saying the books would be good without that at all?
I think so. Now, to be honest, I didn't write them, right? So, like, I don't know if I got every understanding of the nuances behind why he did that villain point of view to begin with. But I just, as I listen to them, I go, would this story have changed that much without it? And then also, how would you implement that information? Like, for instance, book 1, right? It's the guy, I feel like, if I remember correctly, he's like a dude with a bomb, and the villain is trying to blow something up or whatever. And I feel like we could have just gotten all that information through Joe Ledger getting a phone call from somebody. It didn't feel necessary. Again, that's just the difference. We're talking POV, right? So that's the difference between, like, why am I changing from person to third person?
Right.
And I get why he did third person instead of first person, but I don't know why he had to do the villain to begin with. I think it feels kind of cool one story all the way through. Like, we could do Cold as Hell. We could have added the villain point of view and made it a whole lot easier on us to show the villains, right? Rhett? I mean, like, that would have made it tremendously easier.
We were talking about that just
well, I
before
also
we
think
got here.
it's good for showing the reader, like, foreshadowing. You know, if the reader knows what the bad guy's up to and what his ultimate goal is, but Joe doesn't, the reader can see this coming confrontation that Joe may not know about, and I think it builds tension for the reader. You're right; it could be done the other way. I just wanted to chime in because I feel like it's a pretty effective technique.
Is it a genre convention?
As you're using it for that, huh?
Is it a genre convention? I mean, you do see multiple POVs like that in thrillers, and I haven't read Jonathan Mayberry's books, so I'm assuming it's a thriller-esque type of.
It might be just genre.
It could be. That's super mainstream, and like the more mainstream you get, the more I think you want to just make it really clear and easy for everyone to speed read through.
Yeah, and it's like it's the sort of spoon-fed, like, story-driven book versus something as you're the character exploring the world. Like Rhett, I think, talked about Titanborn just before I popped on, right? Like, yeah. Malcolm, you don't always understand exactly what's happening all the time. And so I can understand if you pick up a book at an airport and you get on the airplane to read it, a lot of readers might not actually want to take the mental time to figure out what's going on versus just being told what's happening and enjoy the story itself.
I'm not going to disagree with that at all, because I personally feel like a lot of the mainstream stuff I read is very spoon-feeding.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, so is like mainstream TV.
Right.
Network stuff is watched by more than anywhere, and the mystery is going to get solved at the same time every day, right? Like,
well, it's crazy because, like, as writers, the phrase "as you know" is like the most evil thing that you can do in your book. And every show that I watch, a character says, "As you know, Frank," and every time it happens, I'm like, no. But normal people don't get that. But readers and TV watchers, viewers, or whatever you want to call them, they don't track that. They're like, oh yeah, he does know that. That makes sense.
Ask you to remind me.
Well, it's always fun when you're watching something. When you're watching something and, like, these characters have just driven together in a car for 45 minutes to get somewhere, and then as soon as we open the door, they're talking about the most important aspect of what's happening. Like, all right, we're here now. Now we can talk about the thing that we're going to do.
100%.
It's like you had 45 minutes to discuss that in the car.
Yeah. Actually, as much as I was fanboying about Cowboy Bebop, there was a scene, and I wish I could remember exactly what it was, but I was thinking that exact same thing. Is like, you guys are just now covering this.
Yeah.
This particular points.
Well, it's like the one of the things in pitch meeting when he's talking about the tenant pitch meeting and they're having a conversation, but it jumps multiple set pieces, like they're walking in a train station, and then they continue their conversation like line for line in like different countries as they're
right. Yeah.
talking, like that wouldn't. That kind of conversation just wouldn't happen, but artistically,
Next time we go to Vegas, Josh, we'll just say one line to get on the plane.
Right.
Get off the plane, then you'll answer, and then we'll fly to from
dude.
Dallas
We
to
should
Vegas,
we should do a
the
whole
answer.
video like that, and just
Yeah.
script the conversation, then do the whole week worth of that conversation, then edit it together. It'd be
Man,
In
great.
case you
four people
forgot,
that
since the
watch
last
that
time
are
we
gonna
talked
love
2
it.
hours ago.
Oh, I know. Wait a minute. So we're talking about depth in scene, not technically POV, but depth in scene through POV. So I'm curious, Chuck, you joined us a little bit late. Steve, you joined us a little bit late. We're basically talking about how to flesh out or give your scene more depth, doing different things other than just showing what's happening, right? Like you have a scene and you have like your main thing that's happening, but in order to give that scene a little bit more depth or color, if you will, we're talking about things that you can do to
we
add
began
into
with
that scene.
we began with the assumption that we have a character who's the point of view, but he's mostly just watching what happens around him.
Right.
Is
So
where we started.
Chuck, maybe we'll start with you. Do you have any specific frame of mind or how you go into that scene to give it a little that just a little bit more, so it's not the character?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think in that situation, point of view is important, because I think if you're doing a first-person narrative, you can obviously add, a lot more of the internal voice of the main character and that sort of thing. You can do that in third person too, but I think it's a little more personal if you actually use that character's voice in his own words, kind of thing. That adds depth. You can't forget about the five senses. You want, is it cold? Does it smell bad? What's going on? Make the setting, kind of make the reader feel the setting, because that can always add to like the overall tone of the scene. Like if it's
Hello?
And we're locking up to do a Chuck meme. Somebody
got you.
screenshot that.
Why did I
Lost
not
Chuck.
have the snipping tool out already? Idiot. When Chuck's on, you have to have the snipping tool out. All right, I got it. There, done. Saved.
Well, should we move on while Chuck is
yeah.
Okay.
Steve, go ahead.
I don't edit nearly as much as I used to, but co-editing a lot or co-writing a lot of times feels like editing, right? Rhett will write something and then I'll kind of write into it, and there'll be a whole lot of editing process that goes on. And one thing, not even necessarily talking about Rhett specifically, but one thing when editing, you get a better taste of how to make scenes if you're doing like a heavy line edit, which I tend to do, which is why I don't edit anymore, because either authors love what I do that just took me 100 hours, or they hate it and I don't, make enough money to like do 100-hour edit.
Right.
But what I like to do is take those, say it's in third person, he swung his sword. If it's in first person, I swung my sword. Like, take those sentences. Anytime you're writing, anytime you see he did this, she did this, I did this, change it, right? So like, instead of he swung his sword, metal sparked against metal, the sword hit the shield, right? Like you just tell me what happened, and don't tell me somebody did something. Tell me what the effects of the thing that he did were.
Right.
And
Instead of saying he got hit and he felt the pain, say
Right.
the pain lashed through his arm or something.
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
He felt pain, right? Anytime you tell me he felt something by telling me he felt it, there was a better way to tell me he felt it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Alan calls those filter words: felt, saw, watched,
Yep.
observed, sensed.
And you're talking about right there, that is how you go from a white room where you don't really see what's going on in there, right? Like I could have a whole fight scene in a white room.
Yeah.
And it's all a bunch of actions and things and people's feelings and whatever. But then when you start to craft every sentence around the room and what's happening in the environment, you begin to get a better three-dimensional feel of the story that's going on around you. We don't really need to know everything that the character felt or everything that the character did as long. Like you brought up Dark Tower one time, long freaking time ago. And you mentioned how Stephen King, instead of Nolan raising his gun and shooting his gun, there's another phrase like
he basically talks about his fingers did the work. Like he drew his guns and his fingers did the work, and you can see it. And he's this is in the first Gunslinger book when he's in Tull, and he's basically gunning down like a whole town of crazy people that are chasing after him, and it's his fingers did the work, and the gunslinger knows what he's doing. The reader knows that the gunslinger knows what he's doing, and so the reader, knowing what it looks like to do that kind of stuff, already can visualize it without the writer having to spell it out. And I thought that was fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, like that crack filled the air, birds took off, right? A red rose bloomed on his chest. Like we know exactly what just happened.
Right.
And it's a way of breaking out of that he did this or he did that thing. Because sometimes, man, especially if you're listening to a book and you got 5 sentences in a row of he opened the door, he grabbed his gun off the counter, he entered the hallway and heard a sound, right? Like it's like he did this, he did that, he did this, grating on your ears and eyes at some point. And so like writers search through your manuscript for even first person, search through for I did this, I did that, I did this. And you'll notice how deep you can make your prose by getting rid of those actions and actually replacing it with, I don't know.
It's a good reason to read your work out loud or have it read to you in some form.
I've only done short stories in first person, but when I've done it, I've tried to remove all of the eyes, like, and have as like you have to have some of them, but I try to because sometimes I'll write and like you're saying, he walked into the room, it's like I did this, I did this, I did this, I did this, and it's so repetitive. It's just like I don't want to read it.
That's
anymore.
The biggest challenge, and that's what kept me from writing in first person for a long time. But kind of once you get the swing of it, it's all right.
Right.
That's what editing is for too.
What?
That's what editing is for too. Like that stuff, I don't know
come
if
back
you
and
should
clean that
worry
shit
about on a first run through because you're figuring everything out.
True. Very.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the process, right? Like Rhett's talking. You can go back through and fix all that stuff. You can kind of vomit draft. There's a lot of authors that refuse to vomit draft.
There's some that vomit draft and then don't want to do the editing too.
Right.
Yeah.
I love first person because you can spend time waxing philosophical inside the character's head, and you just wrote 400 words that are not the scene, but create depth of character and depth of point of view.
Right.
It can be a good way to communicate your world building. It can add tension and stuff like that because you can, as a reader, you can get more why rather than saying he was scared of the bullet that was coming at him. You can figure out the reasons, like they weren't going to make it home for Christmas or whatever.
Right.
And you can add a lot to it.
And everything's dialogue. Everything in first person.
Internal dialogue. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So a lot of times in third person, when you're writing, you can get to that point where you're like, oh shit, I've just had prose for like 3 pages and there's been no dialogue interactions. Meanwhile, in first person, all of it feels like active dialogue.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think it's fun too in first person to in third, if you write a scene where you're describing a big, tall, whatever, lavishly decorated building or something like that, you're painting the picture, but it's kind of a boring picture. Like this lavish skyscraper stood in front of me. In first person, if he's snarky, at least you could say, and this fool spent $1 billion on a building that looks ridiculous and it's probably not functional at all, but there it is. And it's got, like, you can make that bit of world building.
What type of unholy obsession did this guy have with Chrome?
Exactly. Like you can make that world building, not only setting building, but also character building, because you're like, okay, I understand this guy.
Just remember, you could do that with third.
Do what?
You could do that with third as well. If you're going to write in that close third style, There doesn't
Yeah,
have
that's
to be
true.
any difference, but you have to be consistent with it.
Yeah.
That's why I always tell everybody there's no need for italicized inner dialogue ever, literally ever. There's never a time where you need it, because if you're in third person in a close point of view, everything the character thinks is already on the page.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's sort of more for emphasis.
Right.
There's a lot of writers that really dial into that first person or that third person inner dialogue where it goes to kind of like present tense.
Yeah.
And
What's that? Sean Coyne has a phrase for that. What is that? I'm gonna have to look it up. Free and something style.
I
Free
do
and
that,
direct,
but very sparingly.
free
That's-
indirect style.
Most like of the bigger editors will say, if you do that, like do it no more than once a chapter. Like it has to
Right.
be a special thought.
Well, normally when I do it, I'm doing it to
Yeah, free indirect speech is what he always talks about.
like be a little bit more flippant than I would be in the actual narrative. In the italicized, I'd be something like, and this guy over here, like he's being sarcastic. He's like, and this guy over there, but that's not what I would write in the narrative dialogue. That's what I use the italicized stuff for, but I don't do it very often, very, very rarely.
yeah, specifically the something he thought, almost always unnecessary.
Yeah.
I get it could be a style thing, but I just
Right.
personally
You can leave out the he thought unless you have lots of people in the scene. Sometimes it's hard to keep track of who's saying what. I've actually tried.
Rick just made a really great comment.
No way.
Which I think is worth it, right? Like he says, I like to do that in third person because I don't want to swear in the narrative or in the prose. So maybe the character will swear. As a matter of fact, Robin, my wife, brought that up one time in one of the Buried Goddess books, book 2. We're very close in Whitney's head, and he said something like, the character went ass over tea kettle, and it was in the narrative. And Robin said it felt really weird that there was a swear word in the prose.
Oh, right.
Meanwhile, I go, I don't care. But
Ass is like a donkey. I don't know that one. I don't know if that one counts.
I mean, donkeys.
Well, but no, I
donkeys and tea
I see what she's saying, and also what Rick is saying too. If I'm gonna say like screw that guy, I'm gonna put that in italics and not have it in the actual narrative draft, because I find that.
And me personally, it'll just be in the narrative.
Yeah. Well, and I've read there's several books that I've read that in the narrative they're like, and this piece of shit over here did this, but for me, in my narrative, in a lot of my books, I don't do that. Now in Weaponized, I have done that a lot, where I've done what you're saying, and it's a very tight, almost first person.
We're down to
third,
down to editorial style at this point.
Yeah.
That's okay.
Are you gonna challenge Devin C. Ford for the most F-bombs in a book? Or
no.
Okay, cool.
No.
Cool.
Well, because it's kind of like a shared title, right? So like I own it.
You take credit for his F-bombs as well as your own.
That's right. No, but I have been like so anti F-bomb now. I'm like going through it, like I'm writing in my draft and I'm like, fuck that guy, and then I'm like, no, I could do something different.
Yeah,
I have to go back and count. I wonder if that count is accurate. I think the count that they made in that review was like 154 F-bombs, which is a lot.
Even again, I'm not just trying to pick on Devin, but like even Territory Wars was great. But the prologue and it's first person and it's really well written.
Yeah.
As that character, but I'm listening to the prologue, which is like 4.5 minutes long or something like that. And there's like 19 F words and it works. Right. Well, I'm like, well, I can't listen to this with Oliver in the car.
To be fair, though, some people do talk like that.
That is true.
Everybody I know talks like that. Basically.
I talk like that.
And on HBO, everyone, no matter what, talks like that.
I remember seeing
even the 7-year-old.
Yeah.
I remember seeing the Commitments that came out. I think you guys remember that, but it was a blues movie, and I think they're from Ireland, like poor neighbors Ireland. They're playing blues, and there was so much F-bombs in that, and everybody's like, "Oh my!" And that was the first time I'd really seen that in a movie where it went to that level. It was just like packed full of F-bombs. But it was also a great movie, a lot of great music too.
I swear like a sailor, and my wife's like, stop swearing all the time, and I don't even think about it. I'm just like, blah blah beep beep beep. If you were to record like an actual conversation with me, like 50% of the words
It becomes
would be
like
beeped out.
Punctuation half the time.
Yeah.
I had an audiobook where I had a narrator. Josh knows the story, who wouldn't say the F-bomb. He'd say any other swear word, but not the F-bomb.
Oh yeah, true.
And I went through and took it out of the book, and it was amazing how irrelevant it was most of the time. Looking at it, I was like, this actually is almost more powerful dialogue without the swear word, because it shortened the 5 words to 4 words, and kind of less is more when it comes to punch. And that was kind of a learning moment for me. Although I do like to use some F-bombs if necessary. Sometimes it's just got to happen, especially for military sci-fi. There's a point where soldiers are going to say that, you know, if you get your foot shot off, somebody's dropping an F-bomb at some point.
True.
It's going to happen.
I remember when I got my foot shot off.
I know. When I was pretty good.
Said, darn it all the heck.
Took that arrow to the knee. Gosh, dab it.
Gosh, dab it. Golly gee willikers, that hurts.
You could just make up your own curse
Owie.
words.
I actually hate that more than anything. Josh knows this. I hate people make up swear words for fiction, but then they use it like twice as much as you would normally use it.
Right.
And it feels really false to me. I'd rather just leave them out or just use something that's close to a real swear word. But when people come up with, I don't know. I've pounded that one to death on another show, I think.
I'm sad because I can't find that review now.
I remember when I was working at the church, my previous job. I was sitting at my desk, and I heard I was a pastor. I heard the senior pastor, the lead pastor, just outside my office talking to the office manager. And I had been heavily watching Battlestar Galactica. I'm talking binge watching 8 seasons, right? And of course, their swear word is
Frack,
right?
Yeah. I actually didn't mind that.
No, I didn't mind it at all. I mean, we have Yig and Shog in The Buried Goddess, and I think it works really dang well.
Swear words need to have a certain amount of percussive nature to be a swear word. By
the way, so the F word and for crying out loud trigger the exact same thing in the head, because the first syllable is fuck. For crying out loud.
Yeah.
It does the exact same trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Therapists use that all the time to help people to like cope with things mentally.
Shut the front door.
Yeah. So anyway, so I'm sitting there in my office, and I hear the lead pastor talking to the office manager right outside my door, and he's talking about fracking. And he's talking about actual fracking, like
oil field fracking.
And I'm sitting in my office going, "Oh my God, he's out there!" Like my senior pastor is swearing up a storm out there. And it took me a minute to go, oh wait, that's Battlestar. That's not really
that's the real world here.
Nice.
I legitimately was having like not a panic attack or anything like that, but like, what is going on? This is happening in a church office.
Well, and I think at the more books that I write, the more I realize that you can show your strength as an author on the for me at least on the lack of swear words that you need. You can show
that emotion through other things, definitely, for sure. There's a whole bunch of made up swear words in the live chat. I like Felder Carb, so is my favorite so far that I've seen.
Felder.
I'm assuming that's a swear word.
Quiznak is fun.
Quiznak. That sounds actually kind of crude.
I like Quiznak.
I have the same argument for music, right? Like I feel like if you have to rely on swear words in music, a lot of times that takes out the lyrical. I mean, people argue with me all the time, right? Like it is what it is. But like I'll put on like a I don't know, a pop playlist or something in the car. We were driving the other day, and I'm listening to this song that should just be like a radio song, and there's like 3 F words in a row, and I got my kids in the car, and I turn it off. I turn to my wife. I'm like, is there no music anymore?
Right.
Yeah.
That doesn't have F words.
And the thing is there was some shock value to using some of these words, 20, 30 years ago, but people do it now like they're breaking new ground. I'm like, no, that's actually been done. Good job. Come up with something new.
I don't even really care about the F words that much, but society does, right? So like, I don't want Oliver, 7 years old, to think that that's an okay word to go to school and use.
Right.
If at some point society changes that, cool. But right now, it is what it is. So I don't know. This is weird. It's a weird
We're
situation.
going to join your next parent-teacher conference and see how that goes.
Well, it's kind of weird though,
Live
man,
stream.
because for shock value, those are in entertainment, especially in visual entertainment. A lot of those things are used for shock value. I remember when The Shield came out and shit was said on regular TV, and you were like,
my
"Holy
God.
crap! I'm watching this show because they're allowed to say shit on national TV." Now it was a great show regardless, but
well, South Park had the shit counter on one episode. Remember that?
Yes, yeah. But I can't remember if they actually did they let it ride?
Yes, they were told they were finally allowed to use, 150 of them in an episode, and it counted every one of them in the
That's
episode.
awesome.
It's a lot less strict now. If it's like after 9 p.m., most of these channels, you could kind of say whatever you want.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, every time I talk to Josh on the phone, my son's like, "What did he say?"
Oh man.
But
he
I'm going to have all
makes
the best things to say on the playground.
If
as
he
soon as I
doesn't
listen to
call
this
me,
guy.
if I call Steve, he makes a point to tell me you're on speakerphone. We're in the car. Robin is sitting next to me in the car.
A panel of pastors is here and my children.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, Oliver.
Yeah, he always yelled at me too.
Well, I think that was a good conversation. It's interesting when I look at scenes now as writing my 11th book, and instead of just writing down what happened, trying to make it a little bit more impactful, making it fun and giving it a lot of depth. I used to have a really difficult time figuring out how to fill the space, right? Like I could never figure out how people would write 100,000 word novel because I'd get done in 50,000 words. But now, like, filling that space, but not making it long, not making it drawn out, not making it boring. I look at that and I look at every scene and go, how can I get that scene more depth than just telling the story and showing what happened?
Yeah, and a lot of getting that length. I was talking to somebody recently about that, specifically asked me how to write a longer series, and my answer was, you need to make everything harder for them. Just everything they do has to be harder to obtain, harder problems to solve, and that'll make it longer in one ways. And then also having some depth of character, some not writing in a white room and all that stuff.
Rhett read something I wrote in 2017. And
Which one?
A lot of F words, he said.
In Bimble, there was a scene where the main character is a middle grade novel, and I actually wrote it for NaNoWriMo. So like it really was get through it as fast as you could kind of thing. And I just never went back and did that polishing edit or even like made the story make sense. And Rhett got to this point where the main character, this kid, is in this fantasy world and he comes into contact with the dragon. And what was it, Rhett? He beats the dragon in like 13 words.
in like a paragraph, he beats the dragon, solves everything, and then all of a sudden the whole book story like changed. And that was when I was like, all right, I'm gonna give you some notes and go back through this. But Steve also had a middle grade kid, which is what, like 10 years old maybe, being bullied by like a 19-year-old. With like a way too old kid to like physically be beating.
Right.
Like making fun of him, yeah, but like physically beating on a little kid.
It was 100% a result of just trying to get through NaNoWriMo.
Trying to write tons of words as fast as quick.
Yeah. Which I'll never do NaNoWriMo again. I mean, I know that it's worked for some
I do
people.
NaNoWriMo every month. I just don't log it with NaNoWriMo.
Right.
Yeah,
I think it creates bad habits. I'm not
most
gonna
indies like doing full time or
like, yeah, I'm going to take a month off and just write 50,000 words.
Do you think that NaNoWriMo has like negatively affected the quality of writing?
Well, I mean,
overall?
I just said it. I think that it creates bad habits.
Well, yes, but do you think people trying to do NaNoWriMo and they're taking that 50,000 words in 1 month and then now they're thinking, okay, now I've got a novel, I'm going to publish it. Whereas before,
if they're doing that, yeah.
Yeah. The purpose of NaNoWriMo was just to say, you can finish a book. It doesn't have to take you forever. That's not the point. Is not like now these are publishable words,
right?
Because most people, they're like, I've always wanted to write a novel. I've been trying for 35 years. I'm like, well, you need to maybe just finish one. Let's just finish any novel,
right?
Put it away, and then write one that's good.
Yeah, it's like a community challenge where everyone pushes each other.
Yeah,
but I don't think like, that word count is too low for most genres anyway.
Mhm.
And
True.
That's why I did a middle grade novel, because I knew I could actually tell a story fit for that genre in 50,000
that,
words.
or you could write romance in that, and that's probably about it.
Yeah, true. Very true.
Josh,
You could just add a bunch of F words in to get the.
I'm
word
gonna write
count
an
up.
erotica book.
Yeah, I think those are actually only like 20,000 words or something.
Oh, I
Josh,
could do that.
That's
Josh,
because
you
the
can write
guy
it.
finishes so quick that it's just over.
Hey,
Hello. Josh should write a bobblehead erotica.
that's I could do that.
It's a female writer, and they're like, "Oh, well, that happened, so it's over."
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That didn't work.
I can't handle you guys. Everybody in the live chat, thank you guys for coming and hanging out with us. Kit, thank you for your questions. I appreciate it. Hey, Sean, what's up? That's my son. Hi, Sean.
Speaking of, don't swear. Come on,
that's
guys.
right.
Clean it up.
I
Let's
swear
get classy.
in front of him like crazy. Leo, thank you for coming on the show. Ken, James, Scott McGlasson, thank you guys for hanging out with us today. It was fun. Rhett and Steve, whoever you are and however you choose to present your identity and or name, thank you guys for coming and talking with us.
I think I only ever use the same name. You're the one who gave me.
No, I
gave me
know.
names.
Yeah, it's fun.
But Steve, look, that's 2 names. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
He's so
Stevie
important.
JC.
Rhett can't get creative with his name.
Next
He's
time,
so important. He has to be 2 people.
yeah, Steve.
We'll just
and
call him by an
Jamie.
acronym SBJC, like he's an organization. It's the
Oh,
SBJC.
JC. I wonder if I did that on purpose.
Oh, I'm sure he did. I'm sure he did. Thank you guys so much for coming on the show. If you're listening on the audio feed and you didn't know, every Monday at 2 p.m. ish, we have a live show on our YouTube channel. It's youtube.com/keystroke medium. You can join our Facebook group. If you Google the Keystroke Medium, we're the only one on Facebook. We're the only one on the internet, really. So you can't miss us. I think next week we're going to do a giveaway with some Keystroke coffee and potentially a Keystroke coffee mug. So if you're in the market for getting some free swag from the Keystroke coffee, of which Steve did the fantastic logos for, and now it's the only coffee my wife will drink. And when I forget to reorder the bag, she gets really, really mad because now she has to like downgrade to Folgers. And she's like, you will order. So literally this time I ordered 10 bags. And she said, when we get down to 5, you will order 10 more bags because I don't ever want to be out of this coffee again.
It's like
will
living
say-
in bondage.
Folgers they have a great
Mind
commercial.
control coffee, it sounds
Yeah.
like.
Do what, Rhett?
They have a great commercial, so I approve.
Oh,
Folgers.
Folgers.
They got a nice little jingle.
The
And then
best.
if you could put in the comments, Rhett and I are thinking about starting a podcast called Keystroke Large. We think it'll be a little better.
Yeah, it'd probably definitely be better.
Improves
At least by
keystroke
size.
Yeah.
larger.
Yep.
I like that.
The bigger, better keystroke.
See, look, even Patricia says writer's block is awesome, and that's all I drink is writer's block. Keystroke.medium.com/coffee. You can get some of your own. You like how I did that? Like really super slick, like product
That was
placement?
pro. I mean, I'm stunned into silence.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks guys for hanging out with us today. Come back next week. We're going to talk about some reading. We're going to talk about some writing, and of course, everything in between right here on Keystroke Medium.
And
Peace.
not that many F words. Just a few.